we have the pleasure of hosting Arshan Dabirsiaghi, a visionary in the realm of application security. Arshan's journey from co-founding Contrast with Jeff Williams to his current endeavors is filled with invaluable insights and lessons that have shaped the cybersecurity landscape. We'll delve into the genesis of Contrast, explore the transformative role of AI in application and product security, and discuss the ever-important human element in the world of automation. We'll also dive deep into Arshan's decision-making process behind Pixee and get a glimpse into the open-source component of their technology, Codemodder.io. Gear up for an enlightening conversation with Arshan as we navigate the intricate world of application security and beyond.
Coding more securely from the start saves your organization time and money while protecting yours and your customers' data. Security Journey provides hands-on secure coding training in an application sandbox that allows developers to identify, break, and fix common security vulnerabilities. Give your developers the opportunity to recognize and prevent common and emerging security issues before they become a problem. Visit securityjourney.com to try our training today.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Application Security Podcast. This is Chris Romeo. I am the CEO of Devici and also a general partner at Kerr Ventures, joined as always by my partner in crime, even though we don't do any crime, but my partner in crime, Robert Hurlbut.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, Robert Hurlbut. I'm a principal application security architect and threat modeling lead at Acquia, and glad to be here today for another great podcast.
And also not a purveyor of crime. Just to let the
and not a
record
purveyor
show.
of crime.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we gotta set the record straight. There is no most wanted list with Robert on it for cyber crimes. No way, because we're the good guys. We're on the good side of the equation, most definitely. So we're joined today by Arshan, and excited to jump in and learn. First of all, Arshan, we always jump right into security origin stories. So we want to know how you got into security. Tell us your background and go back as far as you want to go.
Yeah, I was fascinated with the idea of taking over your computer against your will from a very young age. I thought that was the coolest thing that anybody could ever do. And I was a soccer player, and I compared the feeling of scoring a big goal with finding a vulnerability or finally coming up with like a really good weaponized exploit, and the exploit wins every time for me. I just thought that was so awesome. And so, as a kid, 13, 14, you obviously the outlets you have for that are not, there, especially at that time, there weren't very many authorized outlets to do that kind of stuff. And so I was playing on BBSs. I read Aleph 1's Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit paper and really altered the course of my life. And so I played around. And then when I got to college, I found out that, you could do this for a job, which was, of course, now looking back, feels crazy. But at that time, everybody on IRC that you knew, sort of a side gig. Most people were network engineers, or even security engineers, but really at the network level, nobody was doing, it was all about firewalls and IPs and all that kind of stuff. So to find exploit development sort of as a job was really awesome. So that's how I got my start, was trying to recreate and all the great things in Aleph 1's paper.
Yeah, it's definitely is a seminal work that doesn't get cited much anymore. Like it's not as well known anymore, but we'll put a link to it in the show notes because I know you can still. I think it was in FRAC. Didn't it get published in FRAC?
I believe so. Well, let's recognize some other seminal papers too from that time. I'd love to. FRAC, first of all, FRAC as a zine was really quite helpful in because everybody was kind of self-taught at that time. Also, Tim Newsham's format string paper was mind blowing. I think it was Matt Conover from WooWoo wrote the first heap overflow exploitation paper I read. So I don't know. I just want to throw those out there too. As
that's good. That's,
papers. And Rainforest Puppy was super influential in the web space with his research. So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of folks that are in this space now have been in it for a shorter period of time, and maybe they don't remember, or they weren't around when some of those things were happening. And I can just remember Frack. I mean, Frack was such a great thing. Like, and it was always, truth. It's time for a truth session. I liked the letter, like the comments where people would send in like comments or letters to the editor or something. And it was the snarky responses that they would put into that was like, I know I should have been focused on the technical articles, but I always went to those snarky responses because they always just made me laugh out loud, because they would just like, they would make fun of the person's, like whatever they sent in or whatever. It was just like, I don't know. That was, once again, making me remember.
It was a great mix of like, super technical content, bleeding edge, very obviously counterculture, and lots of funny stuff in there. So for a rebel without a cause, it was like, it was awesome for me.
Yeah. These were our people. It's like we found our people, and the only way we can connect to them is through this zine that comes out. Who knows what the release cycle was? It was always like, when's the next one coming out? We have no idea. At some point in the future. So,
Arshan, you mentioned some of the things that you've done and just your start. But one of the things you also did is that you helped found Contrast with Jeff. So could you also talk about some of the lessons that you learned in doing that?
Yeah, sure. So that's Jeff, for those at home, Jeff Williams, who was chair of OWASP and was one of my two bosses, Dave Wickers, who's been involved in OWASP since nearly the beginning, and Jeff, who was one of the very earliest people there and had a really formative experience there, I think, as chairman of the board for a long time. I learned a ton in that time. I mean, just on, leadership, culture, some of that stuff, I'm just a poor mimicry of Jeff. Jeff is, I described him as like effortlessly never a jerk. And when it's easy to fall into the trap of being insensitive, I think, when you were in charge. And so I learned from watching him that there's another way to perceive, there's another way to deliver leadership. So on the kind of personal skill set development, I was pretty technical at that time, of course, but I learned a lot from him on that side of things. And then, I was a security researcher, but to have a product company is obviously a whole different set of problems and skills to develop. So, all the instruments of building a product organization, venture capital, organizational structures, marketing, and the sales cycle and all that kind of stuff. So, I spent my 30s learning all of that stuff. And at some point it became interesting to me as like, it's another kind of hacking. You're hacking the growth of a company. You're trying to teach the market about a new way of looking at the world, and so that was fun and rewarding. So it really too many lessons to remember.
So did you work with those guys at AppSec?
I did, yeah, absolutely. So that's really where I learned the trade of application security. Before that time, I really was focused on sort of memory corruption kind of space. And so, I learned AppSec from them, from working in that field. And that was a really great setup for Contrast. The first part of my career at AppSec was, it was all about me. It was ego driven goals. And it was about like find the next big thing or release research, and develop my own career. And then when I put that stuff to the side a little bit and I try to say, okay, well let's help customers. And what I found was that the existing automation, which was primarily static and dynamic analysis, was, in my opinion, wasn't fully solving the problem that our customers needed solved. So having another, contrast was born out of that. Need. We felt like we can do something better. We can deliver, customers, instead of giving them 5,000 things, we can deliver them 20 things. And those 20 things are going to be, really refined. We observe them happen in the runtime of the application. So we felt very confident saying, all right, this is the preferred set of things you should work on. Maybe, still something that we'll eventually talk about here today was, the journey still to get from one of those 20 things to something is fixed was still something that needed work. But it was it was awesome to be able to bring that technology to market.
Yeah, and it's great to hear about Jeff's impact and Dave's impact on company culture, and building companies, because I worked with them at Arca Systems before they started Aspect. Arca got acquired by Exodus Communications, and then they spun out of Exodus to start Aspect. But we all learned those cultural things at Arca because we had a group of really smart people that started this company, this Arca Systems company, back in the early 90s. And people like Jeff and Dave and I grew up in that company, watching these other people that were running that company, and learned how to have a company that was very much focused on the people and don't put up with attitudes from, you don't have people that you don't want to work with. Like, we learned all of those things from being a part of this other company. And I was able to bring that forward into Security Journey, the company that I founded. And it's great to hear that. And I assume that Jeff and Dave brought that with them into what all the things that they did. And so there's like some legacy. I think about legacy in our industry. Like, it's not something we ever really talk about, but the people that we all worked with at Arca that taught us how to have excellent companies that people wanted to work at. It's not like any of us came up with these ideas. It's like we watched other people show us how to do it. So it's fun now to bring that to the rest of the industry and encourage other companies. Hey, you can have a company without having any jerks that are part of it. Like, just don't allow people to come in that are like that, and you'll have a place that people really want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I told my hiring managers, I don't know where I got this from. I probably didn't come up with it, but it was, when you're interviewing somebody, imagine what they're going to be like on their worst day. And if you just have a vibe that their worst day, they're going to be unpleasant to work with, because I'm trying to use safe language here, then, it's not worth the risk. Especially in a startup culture, you're trying to do something very irrational, right? It's not rational to start a company and try to change an industry. It's a lot of work, and there's going to be ups and downs. So that you're going to be entering this high pressure situation. And if you suspect that somebody's, going to, under that pressure, is going to hurt the culture, that's really bad, because the culture is everything. As it's been said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So if you can't get the culture right, it's not worth doing.
Yeah, 100%. And like the practice that I've adopted is for my previous startup and for my existing startup is I have a wide group of people interview any candidate, and anybody can be thumbs down. As long as they have a reason. You have to be able to explain why, because there's certain things that that I won't accept as reasons to be thumbs down. But if anybody comes in and says, we use the red, back to soccer, we use red and yellow flags was the terminology that we use. And so somebody would say, I've got a yellow flag. It was like, and so it was designed, they were telling us, hey, this is a cautionary thing. Let's talk about it. And what I found is when someone would describe a yellow flag situation, like, I didn't really know when this is how they answered this. And it made me kind of wonder if they'd be somebody we want to work with down the road. Somebody else sometimes would say, yeah, you know what? like I saw that slightly different in how the candidate approached that. And then if we had an all out red flag, it was like, we're going to pass. And so for me as a leader, I had to give up some of that control and say, if somebody on my team raises a red flag, they just knew we were going to pass. Didn't matter. Obviously, you had to explain why you had a red flag. And if it was a viable reason, we had to pass. But we ended up building a company where we didn't have anybody we didn't want to work with, because we were able to kind of, to your point, you're kind of approaching it slightly differently about saying, hey, what's this person gonna be like on their worst day? And I'm gonna remember that. I'm gonna add that to my my little system here. But I mean, startups, like you said, startups are such a tight knit group. It's you're doing something completely off the wall. Usually you're trying to disrupt an industry or something, and you want to have people that you want to spend time with, that you want to work with, be a part of that. And one person one wrong hire at an early startup can decimate the rest of the team. Yeah. You can have people leave that say, I don't want to work with this person. I can't believe we hired this person. I'm out of here. And all of a sudden now you're losing the people that are really the glue. So that's why hiring is such an important piece.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't even have to be as dramatic as like causing people to leave, but even if people are even just like negative, sort of the acceptable level of negativity we accept from people around us, negativity sucks all the energy out of the room. So it's, you have to, I mean, like, it sounds crazy, but I like when people are smiling and happy and then like they just seem jazzed every day. Those people are, I put a lot of value on that.
Yeah. Cause I mean, in the startup world, you're going to have the worst thing happen and the best thing happen sometimes in the same day.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the morning. I mean, Absolutely. I know you've been there, and sometimes in the morning you're like, we're done. We're finished. This is it. This is the end. And then in the afternoon, you're like, we're going to dominate the industry. And we can kind of joke around about it. Like, oh no, it's never that bad. And sometimes it is that. Like sometimes something happens and you're like, it's just a gut punch. But then in the afternoon, something good happens. And yeah, I mean, it's important to have the right people around you who can deal with that ebb and flow. But like you said, negativity is something that if it can be a cancer inside of an organization, sure. Because then other people get negative. And yeah, so coming back around to contrast now, I've always wondered this question and I've never asked anybody yet. Was Contrast the first company did Contrast define RASP and IAST as a concept? Yeah.
So I'll answer maybe one more final bow up to the previous conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Just to make sure, because I think we all have humility on this call. Interviewing and hiring is such an imprecise art. An interview is such a sort of artificial evaluation of people that, I certainly don't feel like I have everything figured out. And I know that some people just don't interview well, and some people, are going to come off a different way than what they would at work. So anyway, just to say that, I don't pretend that my model is perfect. And
yeah. No, I agree with you. Mine's not perfect either. I mean, this is, yeah. I mean, and some people and I always give people grace in that perspective. Like if somebody, I'm more talking about kind of, we're on the lookout for more of the aggressive tendencies where it's like, this is going to be somebody that's not going to be not going to be fun to work with. I tend to give people more room because like at the end of the day, you hire for attitude. I hire for attitude. I can teach somebody anything.
Yep.
I mean, okay, I can take that back. I can't teach you calculus, or there's a lot of things I can't teach you because I just don't understand and don't know them. But attitude is everything. Like if I get the right person with the right attitude, that shows me that little fire of they'll figure it out. That's attitude will drive my decision there. You can learn the technical things if you got the right attitude to drive it. So, okay. So how about, RASP and IAST? Is this something?
I failed calc. I failed calc 2, by the way. That was the only class in college I failed. So because it was 8 a.m. and there was no way I was going to learn anything at 8 a.m. So it's funny you mentioned calculus specifically.
Well, listen, I got a degree in computer information systems because you didn't have to take calculus. I was staring at computer science, computer information systems, and like, I'm gonna go over here where there's no calculus because that doesn't.
And guys, mine was math. My major was mathematics.
Hey, that's why you're a good you're a good co-host for me, because if I, if you have skills that I can't even I can't even grasp the ability to do a calculus problem. So
I eventually did get a math minor, I think, or at least I sort of qualified for it. But it was a tough journey for me to realize. That was very humbling that this is something you really got to apply yourself on. Okay, so you asked about sort of like other people in IAST and RASP. I think RASP certainly in the modern the modern idea of hardening the runtimes of our application platforms. I don't think I know of anybody who was doing that before us. I mean, there were companies around the same time as us doing that, but I don't think, that it's not like 5 or 10 years before that people were doing it. At least none jump up at the top of my head. On the IAST side, which is the finding vulnerability side, one of my advisors and one of my people I just reach out to all the time for help is Brian Chess, who was CTO at Fortify Software, one of so I'd say the company that won static analysis in the first generation of those tools. And I think they had done some experiments with it. When I was Googling around for these super esoteric errors that I was getting while I was trying to instrument things, I would see Jacob West, who was also at Fortify, trying to solve these same problems, writing bug reports and stuff. So I had seen that people were playing around, but I think it's not easy to prototype, but it's more possible to prototype. I should say, I think you can make a demo and it'll be hard, but to actually get it to perform at the levels of accuracy and performance that people need to actually deploy it, I mean, that's where Contrast has a absurd moat, because there's a ton of problems that have to be solved. So some like hard computer science kinds of things, and then also some things that are you just have to know the runtime of that language better than anybody else to be able to understand how to accomplish your goals in what's allowed on those runtimes. So I think even if people had done some demos, gotten some prototypes off the ground, it's a long journey from there to getting it done, being able to ship something that people will use.
Let's switch gears now and talk about something that is very popular in our industry right now, and that is the impact and influence of artificial intelligence on the world of application and product security. So I thought we'd start there, and I'd love to understand your thoughts and kind of philosophies about how AI is going to impact what we think of as the AppSec market.
Yeah, I've been waiting for this time period for a very long time. Actually, in college, my track was not security because security was not a track then. My track was AI. That's what I did my master's research on. And, of course, everything I learned now there is totally useless now. But anyway, we've been waiting for some of the promise to be delivered in this space for forever. And, even 5 years ago, I would have answered this question very, very differently. I would have said that there's opportunities on the margins for, anomaly detection, maybe you could have some predictive power over like what kinds of vulnerabilities, would be most interesting to prioritize. But I think now, obviously, we're seeing, a lot of startups in the space trying to, use generative AI as a foundational technology, and we're one of those people because I think that a lot of the if you zoom out far enough, we're trying to automate our all the AppSec research, all the AppSec experience that we're trying to that we've accumulated over the years, and so I think that the large language models give us a way to do that. They give us a way to scale using that consultative experience to help lots of people. So I think we're seeing it happen now, and we're going to see more and more. And I'm super excited about it. I think I do think it's people are a little bit too trusting right now of the models. I think as I told somebody the other day, like you can't let it have both hands on the wheel. You have to. You can let it have like one hand, and you can let it sort of lane assist, but you can't absolutely let it drive. It's still quite out of control. But I think maybe if the foundational models help us solve some of the hallucination problems and allow more sort of programmatic control rather than only allowing natural language sort of interaction, I do think there will be some step function, some next generation sort of stuff capable from them. But right now, you really have to be very careful about the problem space that you give it and how you interact with it.
Yeah, and my conclusion so far when it comes to generative AI and how I think it impacts us, let's say for the next 5 years, I see this as more of an assistant than a replacement for any function, any problem we're trying to solve. So in the classic case of development and writing code, an AI can provide the scaffolding faster than even the most senior security engineer or senior developer can. Just because scaffolding in a particular web language and web framework, it is what it is. There's no creativity in scaffolding a particular thing that you're trying to do. So I really see AI as being that super assistant, and I'm caveating this heavily with the next 5 years because I think we're going to see a lot of things move forward over that time. But when I hear people that are, the AI is going to replace things that we do, I don't think AI is going to do that in the short term. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you think we can replace mission critical functionality and let two hands be on the wheel in the next 5 years? Or do you see this as really something that's going to be helping, just more of a helping function?
Yeah, I definitely see it being more of a helper function. I agree that, in the wider societal things, we could get a whole conversation about how it will affect lots of different jobs. But I think for this industry, I agree it's going to be more that, and I think people say this a lot, people that use AI will just consume people that don't use AI, where they'll outperform them, outcompete them. And so, right, you picked a good example. I think Sweep is doing a good job of like showing that, you just tell me kind of the feature you want, and I'll go give you a good start. Like I'll go make a pull request that has a really good start to that feature. And so I think it's going to, hopefully remove some of the toil. But I think there's also risk in this that I don't see people talking a lot about. So obviously, Copilot is just a mirror held up to GitHub, right? Like it's trained on GitHub code that's found in GitHub. And so we know that all the code on GitHub, at least today, was written by humans. And so it has vulnerabilities in it. Mm-hmm. And so the code that Copilot is going to generate is also going to have vulnerabilities. And so the studies have actually already borne this out. There's been multiple university-led studies on this. So not only that, like it should have the same vulnerability density as humans, but I'd argue it's actually going to be even worse, because if a developer, look, all developers are lazy and impatient, and I proudly count myself amongst that crew. But if something works, if they just get, because Copilot now it'll write whole functions for you. If you let it, I think there will be a tendency for developers to understand less and less of their code, because if it works, I'm not going to look at it again. So I think that it's going to be harder to reason about code that you didn't write. And I think it's going to be harder to understand the security implications of code that you didn't really pay attention to. So, we're really betting a lot on pull request review and tools to help us, review and harden that code, because right now I think, it's dangerous for those two reasons.
Yeah, it makes me think of this, the previous 10 years, the Stack Overflow problem, where there were a couple of different university studies that went and looked at Stack Overflow and analyzed the number of vulnerabilities in the top answers, and even found that many times the lower voted answers were the more secure way of approaching something, but something got the most votes, and that's the one that people are copying and pasting, unfortunately, right into their code. I mean, I'm guilty of it too. I've gone to Stack Overflow and I can't figure out how to do this. Oh, look, someone else has already solved it for me. Copy, paste, run. Oh, look, it works. Oh, good. I wrote I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but I wrote an XML processing function for something in Ruby, for a Ruby on Rails app, and we got to the end and I'm like, I don't know why this works, but it does. It spits out the right output at the bottom across multiple test cases. So we just go with it. And I see what you're saying though. That is something people aren't really talking about right now, as far as the inherent risk in introducing more vulnerabilities than a senior software engineer would today as a result of the training data that's coming out of GitHub. And I hadn't even thought about the fact that developers are going to do the same thing I did with my XML function. They're going to go, just works. It spits out the right output at the end. Let's go with it. Push. It's in production. Approve the PR. There it goes. And so, do you think there's going to be a backlash, in the next couple of years, where is there going to be a point where all of a sudden it catches up with us, and all of this code that, we've lost ability to understand fully what's happening? Is there going to be an explosion as a result of this?
I'm trying to create the future instead of predict it. Okay. So, obviously we'll talk about Pixee, which is my new company, and how I'm trying to solve that problem. But, on your Stack Overflow thing, I did want to point out, I think this is a problem that there's probably a part of the problem why the secure answer is down low is that, the community has some idiomatic solution that they have always traditionally upvoted, or the docs say that this is how you should do it. If you look down and you see the more secure answer, because I've seen this as well, a lot of times the API difference between those two is the more secure one, it forces the developer to address a security concern that they don't know exists. And so it doesn't feel like it's confusing to them, because they don't know what is the problem that parameterized queries or external entities, I don't know what that is. So that code is confusing to me. So I'm just going to, just give me the 3 lines that do the thing that I know I want. So it's such a good, I've been arguing for a long time that API design is everything with, for security, because if we can make the developer face the question that they don't know they should be asking, that's how we get them to write more secure code. But those APIs don't usually exist, because people tend to write APIs that just do the one thing that they're asked to do, and so they don't want to broaden the scope of it. But that difference is really the difference in, whether a developer does something securely or insecurely.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, why Robert and I have both dedicated decades to the practice of threat modeling, moving that forward far on the design side. I think where you're kind of focusing us in on is closer to the code itself. And I think both of those things, what's old is new again. Defense in depth is still the ultimate way to secure something the best way possible, is have the most things that we can do that everybody can get behind. And if it starts in design, and then you've got some things that are happening, when we think about the contrast example again in runtime, I'm going to say this, that people shift left, shift right, shift everywhere. But there is, unfortunately, those terms have been so, I'm trying to find the right word, overplayed. Let's use overplayed as the word. That wasn't what I wanted to say, but overplayed. But there is truth to it, though. There is a kernel of truth behind it in doing things early in the process, and having a solid runtime solution is a multiple layers of a defense in depth strategy. And there are nuggets of truth inside of that.
Yeah, I think that, shift I think Contrast has been saying now for a little while, I've been disconnected for a little bit, but I think Contrast is saying now shift smart. And I think I've seen other people say variations of the same thing, which is there are some points when it's super cost effective to do a security process. Like threat modeling, obviously, sometimes you come in and the thing has already been built and deployed for 3 years and you're doing a threat model on it. But obviously the right time to do that is before the first line of code has been written. So I think that, but you have a design in place. So obviously you can't, shifting left for threat modeling is, yes, you want to shift it as far left as possible. But there's some things where it doesn't make sense to shift it lefter because you might be missing context that you don't have until later in the process. Mm-hmm. So I agree that shifting left is generally directionally correct, but you definitely want to shift to the place where it makes the most sense. And I would argue that that's not always as, left at all costs.
Yeah. I mean, we have to approach the world of technology as realists. We've been saying, and Robert and I both have said this literally for decades, that people should threat model before they build something. Now, the catch is nobody listened to us. And a number of other people have been saying it, right, for decades. In general, nobody listened to us. So yes, there is a need both for, but threat modeling still has value even for something that's been deployed for multiple years. It just has there's a different way of capturing that value. It's not going to be the same. We're not going to start rewriting. We're going to redesign the whole thing from scratch. I mean, that might happen 1 out of 100 times, but normally it's going to be how do we make incremental improvements to the thing that we've built by understanding the design and getting closer to it and kind of wrapping that all the way back around. That's one of the things you were mentioning that could be lost is developers becoming more reliant on AI, and they don't have the context. They don't even know how the architecture works because they've relied on other components that have been built either through AI or by other people in the system. And that is an ultimate danger too, that developers lose context of the thing that they're building and they just keep their heads down. Oh, I'm just responsible for this one little piece. Well, how does that one little piece interact with the 17 other little pieces? Oh, I don't really know. I don't understand that context. Then we start getting some really dangerous areas where unpredictable things will start to happen.
Yep.
Yeah. So Arshan, you mentioned your company Pixee and some of the things that they're doing, but curious, how did you choose the product area that Pixee covers amongst all the other issues in application security?
Yeah, that's an easy one. My co-founder also came from Contrast. We were both kind of we were kind of leaving at the same time, and we just got to talking about the different problems that AppSec, that there weren't AppSec left to solve. And we weren't immediately thinking, let's go start a company. But he, my co-founder, who's Sarag Patel, by the way, was chief strategy officer at Contrast. He had, he challenged me because for the first time in a long time, I didn't have a job. And so he said, how much can you fix things? Like, instead of just reporting things, can you fix things? And I said, well, we've done hackathons before and we were able to solve some stuff. It didn't feel like we ever put enough time into it to really discover the depth of that, how far we could go. And so 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, I came back to him with a demo and I said, this is really exciting. So, I had a GitHub app that you would subscribe to add the GitHub app to your GitHub repository, and it would start fixing things that were trivial to identify and things that your static tools or IaaS tools would identify. And so it was really, it was just I wish I could say it was more, there was a lot more research put into finding the problem. But really it was, that challenge from my co-founder. And we had seen this pain in customers before where, we're trying to, in the application security testing tools space, we're trying to find things. And then, but if you went to a meeting where there was let's just say the CISO and the CTO or the CIO, we would say, hey, look, we did a great job. We found 1,000 things. And the the CTO would ask, or the CIO would ask the CISO, how many of those things did you fix? And the number was always way less than what we wanted. And of course, that doesn't say anything about our tool or about the developer. It doesn't say anything about anybody. The problem is the journey from somebody's identified something to something is fixed. I mean, it's ridiculous when you take a step back and say, okay, a tool finds something, it goes into a bug tracker, it gets horse traded by some product manager. Somebody has to prioritize it. The engineer who works on it, probably not a security expert. They have to reverse engineer what a good fix would be. They probably get it wrong the first time. And we've had this mantra in security. I'm sure you all know, like, oh, don't write your own crypto, right? We always tell developers, don't roll your own crypto. And I've seen that before, but I haven't seen it a lot. But we do tell developers every day, hey, fix this deserialization vulnerability, fix this XXE, fix this other esoteric vulnerability class, as if that's easy, right? As if they understand all the technical, everything in the weeds about those vulnerabilities. They don't, and they almost shouldn't. It's an unfair expectation for them. They're not being, even if they are being trained on security, how much are they retaining? Are they going to remember from their training, like, oh, deserialization, I have to be careful here. What's the security control I should use? And so the journey to getting an accurate fix is actually absurdly long and winding. So it is a problem that we definitely knew about. But how we arrived upon solving was really very flippant. But I'm so excited that he asked me that question, because I'm so excited to be here talking about it.
And as we were talking before, you mentioned Codemodder, Codemodder.io, open source component that you're using, that you're building as a piece of this solution. So let's talk about what the open source piece is here, and love to understand what it does, how it does it. Go into some details here.
Yeah, so there was, I should say, this is like the second or third generation of internal tooling we've created, and we're very happy with where we ended up. And so that was really why we've gone open source, is because we think we've reached, stability, at least in the technical direction of how we're going to change code to make it more secure. But code mods were, the term code mod came from an engineer, Justin something, I'm forgetting his name, at Facebook. And it was a very simple, like, Python script that was like, give me a regex to find and give me a regex to fix. Like, what is just like, give me this and replace it with that. And so he was using that to perform, just sort of reducing toil of doing refactoring of one API to another. And that idea kind of, like, I don't want to say died, but it didn't really reach escape velocity. And then the JavaScript community picked up this idea of code mods, and they were writing code mods for solving what I'd say as little problems. The React community is really good about, they write code mods to translate, like, from React 4 to React 5. And when I saw this tool, I was like, oh gosh, this is an engineer named Swix, a YouTuber, told me, like, oh, you're writing code mods for these other languages. And I said, what is a code mod? But anyway, so these code mods, the problem with them, the reason we don't see them solving problems sort of at scale is they're not very expressive. You can't say, like, if it's Tuesday and, the code is this and there's some data flow things, like, you can't do that. It's like, if you're using API A, change it to API B. And so there was a natural, very low ceiling, I'd say, on what types of problems you could solve for that. And so Codemodder is a framework for developing code mods. Right now, we support Java and Python, whereby instead of trying to build a technology that tries to do all the complicated things in searching code and mutating code, it's really a orchestration framework where you can You can plug any tool you want. You can plug in PMD or find bugs or semgrep or contrast. And so you're stitching together tools that are good at finding things and connecting them with tools that are good at fixing things, tools that are good at mutating source code, like libcst for Python and Java parser and Spoon and JS CodeShift. And so there's, this idea of stitching together the community loved idiomatic tools for finding code and then changing code is a new idea, and one that I'm super proud of, because it's a much quicker journey for me to build an expressive code mod if I can write the rule in PMD, and then I can change the tool, change the finding that thing finds with Java parser. I can write a code mod, really, really quickly. Whereas if I tried to, it would be a very ocean boiling approach if I tried to write one new tool that did all of those things. It just would never work. We'd never get there. And so it was born out of necessity. I was trying one of those ocean boiling approaches, and that's how we ended up eventually with Codemodder.
So this is a framework that others can contribute to, given that it's open source. So is your vision that you're going to create a community, an open source community around people that are creating these things and sharing them in a way that others can, I think about like semgrep and their rule approach. I don't know why I'm using that it's just what's coming to the top of my mind. Semgrep created the engine, and then they have an open source component of it, and lots of people contribute rules to make to provide something that I can go grab and add to my. It may not be a semgrep rule. It's something that somebody in the community made that I'm like, that's something that's finding something interesting. Is that kind of your vision for the community around Codemodder?
Yeah, we'd love for people to build their own code mods, and we don't have anything like we're big fans of semgrep, and we love the registry that they have where you can go and build stuff, and there's a playground, and people can sort of share rules with each other. That's absolutely something we'd love to do. We're still pretty early, so we unfortunately we don't have time for everything yet, but we absolutely, that's one of the reasons it's primary reason we made it open source, is we want people to be able to build code mods and do whatever you want with them. You can build code mods using our framework and then deploy that. You don't have to buy our product, we actually don't sell it yet, but you deploy it in a GitHub action, and then you can just make sure that any code that that you want to change gets changed in your CI process. I'll give you an example. If you're giving the same PR comments over and over, that's a great opportunity for a code mod. So you'd write, instead of writing another comment, you'd build a code mod, add it to a GitHub action, and now whenever somebody commits, it'll just run that code mod on it, and your advice will be applied. You've automated yourself to make the code changes that you want to see in all of your code.
What's kind of the check and balance, I guess, of that, as far as you're making, or I guess, where's the feedback loop? How do you get a feedback loop coming out of that? Because at the end of the day, I want the development population to get better. I don't want to have to string together hundreds or thousands of code mods, which then get us to the state of secure, as close as we can get to secure. So any thoughts on, is there a feedback loop that you see fitting into this?
Absolutely. So that's why PixieBot, who uses this technology, we are super, we prioritize the storytelling of this. Every time you make a change, you should be communicating to the developer what you did, why you did it. And so perform that, and the act of that feels like PR feedback, which we're used to getting, of course. Mm-hmm. But what's really happening is there's a micro training going on. Okay, got it. I learned about this issue, on to the next thing. And so over time, developers will get exposure to, lots of different security issues, lots of different ANSI patterns that they see the right patterns for. And so, I did a book club on patterns at Contrast with my team, and it was the best thing about that book club is every week we took a chapter from a certain Java patterns book, and we talked about it. And whoever's leading the session, they took the pattern and they found the anti-patterns in our own code and led us through a discussion about that. And that hit home so much more because, rather than an example from a book with a contrived piece of code in it that means nothing to me, having that being done on your actual code base, I think is people are going to get way more invested, way more quickly, and see value much more quickly because it's I don't know, I'm getting the training, but also it's improving me at the same time. And so I think that will be a very interesting part of what we're doing.
Yeah, and I've seen that in the wild as well. Like when people are looking at security issues in their own code, they lean in a little bit closer. When you're versus looking at an example. I mean, my classic go-to example was if we look at this bug in OpenSSL, everybody kind of tunes out. That's not I use it, but it's not my problem. Right. Let's look at this little segment of code that this team put together. Then everybody kind of leans in a little bit like, wait a second. He's talking about the thing that I'm responsible for. He's calling my project, maybe not as perfect as I believe it is. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that approach. I'm glad to hear you've thought about that feedback loop already, because that seems like a really powerful thing. We got to get to the lightning round, but super excited about where you're going with this, Arshan. We're gonna be following along and cheering you on as well as you go forward. But our listeners have become accustomed to a lightning round segment led by our very own Robert. So Robert, take it away.
Yeah, so we have 3 questions. So first one is, what's your most controversial opinion on application security, and why do you hold that view?
There's no buzzer, so I'm gonna. I don't know how long the lightning round questions can go. I think I have a couple, but I think the one that I'll just be purposefully inflammatory here. But things that fix things and paved roads kind of APIs offer so much more value than things that find things. And because what actually reduces risk at the end of the day is when code gets hardened, when code gets remediated, and so and when vulnerabilities could never have been created in the first place. So I'm a root cause kind of person. So I think we should be spending a lot of our focus on those things. And the way we spend money now is very much imbalanced in that way. I think we spend a ton of money on the things that CISOs and their groups get measured on, the number of vulnerabilities found, then there's a lot of value proving in the processes we do. There's a lot of, we measure ourselves on the processes, but not the outcomes as much. And so the outcomes should be how many things were fixed, how many things were hardened, how many things were eliminated from ever being created. So I think the short version of that is we need to change how we incentivize ourselves in the security industry.
Makes sense. What would it say if you could display a single message on a billboard at the RSA or Black Hat conference?
The North Star of every security person should be to make the VP of engineering own security. So I think the engineering team is the least cost bearer of security. And if we give them that problem, you own AppSec. I'll talk specifically about AppSec. If they own the problem of shipping secure code and they're just going to get, oversight from AppSec, I think that's a much better model. Whereas I see a lot of a really clear cultural line between those two, where security is throwing things over the fence without really understanding all the context. And so I do think engineers understand the code better than security does, and they're the ones that will find the cheapest, most effective way to fix it. And so if I could wave a magic wand, if I could make a billboard, I think it would drive towards that. Like, we need to make the right person in charge of fixing this problem. And that's not how the world is today.
Okay, last question. What's your top book recommendation and why do you find it valuable?
Book? It's with me at all times. Slight exaggeration. All right. This is for pure listeners. It's Hacking, The Art of Exploitation by John Erickson. I think I still even have I think mine is only a first edition, and there's been other editions which I haven't read yet. But it is such a good intro to very, very complicated security topics. It's not a ton of AppSec in there, but I think the foundation, a lot of foundational memory corruption network stuff is in there. And I just, it's a book that I think could replace whole classes in college. Just a very, very well written, and the concepts are so, I don't know, so cleverly discussed in there that I'm never met him, but I'm a big fan. John Erickson.
Cool. So Arshan, as we kind of wrap up our conversation here today, is there a call to action, a key takeaway, something you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, look, I wanna be your virtual staff security engineer. That's the purpose of Pixee and PixieBot on GitHub. So, my call to action is, go add us on the marketplace, give it a try. We support Java and Python right now, and we want your feedback. We want to know what's working, what's not working. We don't sell the product today. We're just happy to get happy to get it in the community. And so I'd love for people to just try it and tell us what you're thinking.
Very cool. Well, thanks.
We want to harden your code. We want to remediate your vulnerabilities. Like, we want to do it all for you. Using, and by the way, I probably should mention, in case it wasn't clear, we do use a combination of sort of AI, LLM sort of assisted techniques, and then things that don't use LLM. So we use a combination of both. So if you're scared of AI, don't worry about it. We don't use a lot of it. And if you're excited by AI, I think you should, I look forward to showing you what we've been cooking.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing your insights, talking about the history with contrast. And, it was a great conversation just for me to put together some of those pieces that I maybe didn't understand from the past, but also hear what you're up to now. So like I said, we'll be cheering you on as you guys move forward with Pixee. And thanks for being a part of the Application Security Podcast.
Thanks. It was so fun.